Hey friends, are you guys ready for chapter 8? Did you think about all those questions I asked you at the end of chapter 7? I hope you did. All right, here we go with chapter 8. This is where we left off with chapter 7. Maybelline and Leroy were heading in opposite directions. Leroy stood in a patch of mud. He looked down at his socks. They were very dirty. He looked up at the sky. He watched as the rain slowed to a trickle. The thunder grumbled and rumbled and then slunk away. The last raindrop fell. The world became quiet. The sky was gray, but at the horizon there was the slightest hint of pink. "Dawn is coming," said Leroy Ninker, "and I do not have a hat or boots or a lasso or a horse. I don't even have an umbrella. I have nothing at all." Leroy watched as the sun slowly rose. The orange ball of it glowed brighter and brighter. He shook his head sadly, and he looked down at his muddy socks again. And then, in the pink and hopeful light of dawn, Leroy noticed something in the dirt. He bent down and traced the shape that was imprinted in the mud. His heart thumped inside of him. "Yippee-yi-yo!" whispered Leroy Ninker at the hoof print. He looked past the first hoof print, and then he saw there was a second and a third. "Maybelline!" shouted Leroy Ninker. He followed the hoof prints. He started to run. He may not have a hat or a lasso or boots, but he was tracking a horse, his horse. Maybelline was out there somewhere, and a cowboy named Leroy Ninker would find her. The horse was, indeed, out there somewhere. To be specific, she was 3 streets over. The horse was on Deco-Woo Drive. She was standing at the window of a house, and she was watching a family sitting down to breakfast. Wonderful, wonderful smells were coming from inside the house, and the family looked happy sitting together around the table. Maybelline put her nose very close to the window. She watched the family and she admired the food. Leroy Ninker was following the hoof prints when he heard a sound that made him stop in his tracks. Leroy held himself very still and he listened. He heard bird song and the low hum of a train. He heard the whoosh of car tires on the wet pavement. And then he heard that beautiful, singular noise again, a whinny. A horse, his horse, Maybelline. Leroy ran in the direction of the whinny. "Maybelline!" he called out. "I'm on my way!" He leapt over a bush and he ran around a bicycle. He climbed over a fence and into a backyard. And there was Maybelline. She was standing and looking in the window of a house. "Maybelline!" shouted Leroy. The horse turned and looked at him. She twisted her ears left and right. Both ears trembled hopefully. It was obvious that she was waiting for some beautiful words. He smiled. He spread his arms wide. "Horse of my heart," he called out, "most wondrous, most glorious of all horses, I have missed you so." Maybelline nickered. She came trotting toward him. Leroy put his arms around her. He closed his eyes and he leaned his head against her neck. How's Leroy feeling now? Has his feelings changed since chapter 7? He had done it. He had taken hold of fate with both hands and wrestled it to the ground. He had done it without a lasso, without boots, and without a hat. "Oh, Maybelline," said Leroy, "I have so many words I want to say to you." Leroy's eyes were still closed when he heard a voice say, "Mister, is that your horse?" And that's where we will end chapter 8. You guys, we are so close to being done with our story, Leroy Ninker, which is one of my favorites. We have one more chapter and then an ending to read tomorrow. I hope you'll join me, and then I'll send you on Blooms. I'll send you the link to the Quizlet that you can take over the book. All right, happy reading.